Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending on where you are. Welcome again to training your team to meet the expectations of Generation Z. I'm Kirk Delario. I'm the co-founder and chief evangelist at AdmitHub, and I'm here to help facilitate the discussion today. Leading this dank presentation is Sheena Hardigan, Director of Enrollment Services at Ocean County College. Sheena, I'll pass the mic to you for a quick introduction.
Hello, thanks, Kirk. I am, as Kirk said, the Director of Enrollment Services at Ocean County College. We are a community college located close to the Jersey Shore, and I am in charge of all of our communications and also our one-stop.
Thanks, Sheena. Now, Sheena is finna drop some knowledge. How was that, Sheena? Was that pretty good?
That was pretty on point.
She's finna drop some knowledge on how she successfully reoriented her team's communication strategies to engage this new generation of students. No cap. Now, if that sounded a little foreign to you, don't worry. By the end of this webinar, you'll be speaking Gen Z like a boss. So just a quick note to everyone on questions and answers. We're going to leave some time for discussion at the end and Q&A, but also please note that you may ask questions at any time in the chat section, and when you do, you can hit the drop-down menu and you can select to all panelists, or you can select to all panelists and attendees if you'd like the group to see your question as well. And we'll hope to cover as many of these as possible, time permitting. We also would love to hear more about who is attending this webinar. So we'd love for you to introduce yourself on the chat section, and you can send again on the drop down to all panelists and everyone. Maybe tell us your role, your institution, and we always like to do a bit of an icebreaker during these webinars and figure out a little bit more about our audience. So how about your role, your institution, and your favorite fall primetime TV show? I'll start it off and say that because my high school age children are watching this nonstop, it must be The Voice. Sheena, how about for you?
I am almost ashamed to admit it, but I can't stop watching The Masked Singer. It is mindless and completely obsessed. So good. Amazing.
Well, let's kick it off. We'll hit to the agenda here quickly, and I'll talk about what we're going to cover here today. Here today, we're going to learn more about Ocean County College, and then Sheena's going to turn her attention to Generation Z. Who are they, and how do they process information and communicate? Now, side note, you're also in for a real treat. So who says webinars can't be fun? Stay tuned. Then Sheena's going to discuss the customer service expectations of this generation and how she's trained her staff at OCC to meet these expectations. She's also going to give more detail about the communication strategies they use at OCC to engage their students. And then we'll take a closer look at how these changes resulted in measurable success at Ocean County. And finally, we're going to leave some space to address your questions. If you're new and just signed on, this is a note and also a reminder for everyone. You do have the option to ask questions throughout the presentation. Feel free to do so in the chat section. You can just hit the drop down, send your question either to panelists only or to everyone. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Sheena, who's got the tea for you good people. So let's get started with some real talk. Sheena, take it away.
Thank you, Kirk. So want to give you an overview of where I am. Like we said, I am from Ocean County College. We are the first community college in the state of New Jersey. We have 19 community colleges, but ours is the first, not bragging, but totally bragging. We were founded in 1964. We're located in Toms River, New Jersey, which is about 7 miles from the Jersey Shore. So if you've seen the show on MTV, then you know exactly where we're located. They're not my students, but that's literally where our college is. We have a bunch of areas of study. It says 50. We actually have 74 different certificate and degree programs, but we are a 2-year school, so it's AA, AS, and AA degrees. We sit on 275 acres, and we have had nearly 20 new buildings in the past 18 years. We have a brand new student center. We have a totally renovated health sciences center. They're actually building us a brand new one-stop student enrollment building, which is anticipated to be complete January of 2021, so we're looking forward to that. Our vision statement indicates that Ocean County College will be the boldest, most creative, most innovative student-centered college in America, and by pioneering community college education internationally, will be a prototype for global education. No pressure. We actually have international partnerships in Egypt. We are the first American community college on the ground in Egypt. And so we are on our fourth cohort of students there. So with that vision statement, no pressure to grow enrollment, says the director of enrollment. There we go. We knew that we needed to have some new ways. We knew that we needed to do things differently, and there's a few reasons why. We have a lot of new technology in the past decade. We have a new group of students in the past decade. This new technology that's out there now has allowed us to be more functional. It's allowed us to streamline processes. It's allowed us to be more intrusive, more aggressive, and it's really allowed us to understand our students' needs. If we understand our students' needs, we are much more capable of meeting their needs. We also, you can't see the infographic, but I promise you it's there. We are fighting declining enrollment, which is not a unique issue amongst community colleges especially, but colleges in general in the country. New Jersey specifically, and within our county, we are facing a declining high school population, and that's not going to get better. We're going to see a little blip in 2021, 22, but we're seeing a decrease in high school graduates, which means we're seeing a decrease in enrollment, and we're having to find additional ponds to fish in. From 14 to 18, we actually saw a 10% decrease on full-time enrollment and 14% on part-time. That being said, we did see an increase between 17 and 18, but overall, we're still down from where we were about 5 years ago. If we continue, go ahead, Kirk.
A quick question about that, Sheena. Have you found that is typical in your community college cohort, or they're facing a similar challenge?
They are, yeah. It's not a unique situation due to the declining high school population, essentially. Community colleges typically will see a roller coaster of enrollment. As the economy goes up, college enrollment is going to go down, and so that's where we are right now. The other thing that leads us to change is our students have changed. We are not seeing the same students that we did 5 years ago, right? So if we continue to do the same thing year after year, that's literally the definition of insanity. We have to change to meet this new generation of students. So who is Gen Z, you might ask? Generation Z is actually the only generation that is defined by a historical event. Do you know what event it is, Kirk? Any idea?
I've been trying to think about this for over a day, and I'm still in the dark.
Okay.
You wouldn't tell me.
Oh, I will tell you now. Generation Z is actually defined by 9/11. Students that were first grade at 9/11 were born in 1995, and so anybody from that point on really isn't going to remember where they were or what they were doing on 9/11. They are only going to understand it from a historical point, something that they're going to learn about in school or from their textbooks.
Interesting.
So, yeah, Gen Z actually incorporates 4.25 billion people worldwide, and it's about 40% of the U.S., which makes it about 40% of the buying power by 2020 as a consumer. More than 50% of Gen Z, they claim to be addicted to their mobile devices. I think that number's low, though, and I don't think that's necessarily unique for Gen Z. I know I check my phone like 400 times a day. 97% own a smartphone. They spend about 4 hours and 15 minutes a day on their phone. And when you think about it, you have teenagers, right, Kirk?
I do.
They sleep a lot, right?
And they sleep with their phones as their pillow.
Right, right. So they're really only awake like 10 to 12 hours a day. So they're spending about a third of their wake time on their phone.
Their woke time or their wake time?
Good, we're getting there. Your vocabulary has increased significantly since learning about Gen Z.
Learning every day.
This generation, they are multitaskers, and what that essentially means is they, on average, can communicate and maintain 5 screens at a time. You or I can do 2. They are the most diverse generation, and what I mean by that is diverse. 50%, almost 50% of Gen Zers, age 6 to 21, are not white. They will never remember things being an issue. So growing up, things that were issues for some of us were things like having a black president or gay marriage being legal. These are things that were never an issue for Gen Z. They always just existed. The next one's really important, snacking. That's how Gen Z takes in information. They would much prefer to have bite-sized pieces. So that's B-Y-T-E, bite. Get it? Get it? Bite-sized pieces of information. So this is the generation that communicates through the 6-second Vine or 160 characters. They communicate through scrolling. This is the generation that turned 3 words, like laugh out loud, into 3 letters, LOL. They are experts on condensing their information. They're the DIY generation, so they want you to teach them to fish. Thanks to HGTV, the cooking channel, Pinterest, they can literally learn anything. My daughter, I'm positive, will learn to change a tire watching YouTube. Students today, they can learn to make penne vodka by watching, Snapchat. You can literally, they want to be able to do it themselves, essentially. And the last one is the visual generation. This is a group that communicates through images. There's GIFs and emojis. They can tell an entire story using e-cards. If you're using just words to communicate with a student, you're not getting through because that's not how they communicate. Their brains are actually different. So to speak a little more to who Gen Z is, we wanted to do a fun little piece to see if you speak Gen Z. So we have a video, which I'm hoping we can get to. Kirk, if a Gen Z had made this, it would be much more effective.
That's right. This is beautiful. Except there's no volume. We might have to send a link. What we will do is we'll send this link following up this presentation if the audio doesn't work. There are a lot of storms happening in Boston right now, which is messing with the internet connectivity. And I remember back in the day, this is not Gen Z, this is very Gen X, but remember, Sheena, back in the day when a storm would hit and you'd be watching the tube and the technical difficulty or that little lightning bolt would show up on the TV. That's kind of what I'm feeling. So we will. That does more. We'll send that along later, but it's a wonderful video and it's a must-see. It's must-see TV. It's must-see YouTube for sure.
It would be your new favorite fall show, probably.
But we will move on to speaking Gen Z.
Yeah, we can do some fun facts. So I actually, I have 3 nieces that are 13, 15, 17, and I work with students all day long. And so I thought, let me listen to them. Let me not just actively listen for their problems and solutions, but let me hear the words coming out of their mouths. And I started taking note of the slang, I guess, or the Gen Z terms that I didn't know. So my niece said to me the other day, the 15-year-old, she says, "Aunt Sheena, you are looking like a whole meal." I was like, oh no, I have to lay off the Pringles, right? She was like, no, you're not looking like a snack. It's a whole meal. I was like, what is she talking about? A whole meal is actually a good thing. So it means like you're looking really good, right? The next term is, dun, 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 come on, Kirk. There we go. Dank. So this workshop, this webinar, it's dank. It's really good. Really good. It would be really better if the internet worked better, but go ahead. Our next one is, it would, yeah, finna. So I think Kirk used this before. After this webinar, I'm finna help you see that you missed, right? Fitting to, I'm really looking forward to. Do you have the hot tea, Kirk?
I used tea earlier as well.
Yeah. It's good gossip. It's gossip. And you don't want to spill the tea, right? Like spread the gossip.
Oh, that's I just learned that.
No cap, when this webinar is done, I am going to re-up my coffee. So that's honestly. I'm honestly going to do that. And then a student ambassador said this the other day, that there was a student in class who gave an answer to the hardest question because she was woke. She was woke. She was really, really smart. I don't know why you wouldn't just say she's really, really smart, but literally they speak a different language is what we're trying to show you here. So what is speaking Gen Z? I know we did a little wordplay. We kind of walked through some of Gen Z's terms, but Gen Z is really just customer service expectations. The new generation of students, they've grown up with technology in their hands. They've literally been born with their faces glued to a cell phone. And so we have to learn to meet their expectations instead of expecting them to meet us where we are. So really respond immediately. I don't know if you've ever tried to get in touch with Amazon's customer service. You go on, you ask if they say, do you need to speak to somebody? You say yes. They say, do you want us to call you right now? Okay, we will. And then your phone rings like 6 seconds later. That's the customer service expectation that they have. And that is what we need to have as institutions in higher education in order to meet their needs. The number one customer service company, actually, according to the ASCI, which is the American Customer Service Index, the number one company is Chick-fil-A. Did you know that?
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, they say things like, you're very welcome. So I now say things like, it's my pleasure. But that's what they expect, right? So that's what we need to do also. Accuracy, there's Google. There's no reason somebody should ask a question that we don't know the answer to. We should be right, and we should be consistently right. Nobody has time to hear, oh, so-and-so is new, they didn't know. They don't care. You need to be consistent, and you need to be accurate all of the time. If Google can do it, so can you. The Netflix experience. So this is basically consumer or client behavior-based marketing. Our students are used to going on Netflix, watching a show, and then having a recommendation of the next 5 shows or movies that they should watch. Because you watched X, you probably will like Y. We need to offer that same experience to our students. Because you completed your application, you probably will have questions about financial aid. It's not just answering the question, it's also predicting what the next question and answer will be. Oftentimes I get asked, like, don't you think that's a little creepy? It's not, because that's what our students expect. They expect if they're talking to their friend about buying a new Ninja coffee bar, that they're going to see ads for Ninja coffee bar on their Instagram tomorrow. You know, it's an expectation, and so we can meet that expectation. The next one was hard for me, actually, when we were developing our one-stop. How do we offer 24/7 assistance to our students? I am awesome to work for and to work with, but I can't hire people to work at 11 o'clock at night. And we did a recent focus group, and our students said, we do our enrollment type of activities between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. That was the most popular time. And I thought, shoot, how do we offer that kind of assistance? What are we going to do? And the last piece is the ability to self-serve. They want to do it themselves, and that goes hand in hand with the DIY part of Generation Z. So how do we train our team to speak Gen Z? We do 6-week training for our technicians, and it's broken into modules. Each module contains different types of training. So there's training on systems, which would be like our student information system, our CRM, how to use our queuing system, things like that, and the additional trainings above. So transactions, that would be how to drop a class, how to add a class, how to do document scanning, how to check a student's financial aid, how to package a student, things like that. Population-based and communication-based, which we're going to dig into a little bit more here. With each training area, there are hands-on activities, there's shadowing, there's coaching, and then there's weekly one-on-ones for feedback. And what that allows us to do is meet all of our new technicians' learning styles, but also kind of pepper in the various types of training that they need throughout their 6-week training. It is an organic process. We're continually assessing and reassessing and then assessing again. We plan out our training on a yearly basis, and we ensure that we do all of these plus just-in-time training, which would be like the need-to-know things, like your 1098Ts, stuff like that. So to dig in a little bit more to the population-based and the communications training, these are some examples of the types of populations that we train on. Generation Z, which we talked about, they have this expectation that we're going to meet them where they are, and that means meeting their unique needs. They have an expectation that customer service is going to be individually based for them. If they're a veteran, they expect we're going to walk them through what kind of paperwork we need for their benefits. If they are an early college student, they have the expectation that we know that, and we're not going to go ahead and ask them for their high school diploma because we know they're still in high school. We need to meet their needs on an individual basis because the one-size-fits-all student marketing no longer works. We can't just blanket everybody with the same message. You need to do step 1, 2, and 3 because not everybody does need to do step 1, 2, and 3. An undocumented student is going to have a very different set of steps to take in order to get into college than a student veteran. And so the students don't necessarily want to tell us, no, that step doesn't apply to me or that one does, because frankly, they don't know. So we do specific training on what each population is going to need so that we can concierge them through the process. In addition to the population-based training, we do inclusive language training, and this is a big one. So why, you're probably thinking, are there pancakes on my slide? There's pancakes on my slide because of a great story. So I have a 1-year-old and I also have a 3-year-old, and it's really fun in case you were curious. But my 3-year-old is everything I deserve. She is all of the sass that my mother wished upon me. And we went to a diner because that's what you do in New Jersey, because there's diners every 6 feet. So we were at a diner, and she ordered chocolate chip pancakes. And out come a stack of hot and delicious pancakes with chocolate chips on top, and she immediately burst into tears because they were not chocolate chip pancakes. I said, what are you talking about? Well, absolutely, those are chocolate chip pancakes. That's what you ordered. She said, they're not. Those are pancakes with chocolate chips on top. They're not chocolate chip pancakes. And so I tell you this story because it's relatable, right? Inclusive language is like customer service in that it needs to be baked in. It's not, look at that, it shows up when I say it. This is like real predictive here. It needs to be baked in. It can't be something you sprinkle on top. You can't just sprinkle it on top of your team's training. You need to literally make it part of your everyday because it can't be an afterthought. The ways that we do this in the hub, which is the name of our one-stop, are through specific greetings. When we greet a student, we say, "How may I find you in our system?" or "What name might you use in our system?" A student's chosen name might not necessarily be the name on their FAFSA, and so we want to be sure we're inclusive of that. We use gender-inclusive language. We wouldn't say something like, "Excuse me, ma'am," or "Excuse me, miss," because we don't know necessarily what gender someone identifies as. This was, and I'll be really candid, this was the hardest one for me to bake in because I used the words, "Hey guys," a lot. And a technician said to me that that was not inclusive language, and so that's one that I had to bake in myself. Age-inclusive language. I was part of a leadership academy here at the college, and we had a leadership coach. And I was very excited to meet with the leadership coach, and I walked in, and day one, she said, "Hello there, young lady." And I was appalled because I felt like saying young lady. First off, you're assuming my gender, but that's just a whole nother piece. Young lady, it just seemed so condescending. And I said, maybe she, I thought in my head, maybe she just doesn't know. So I'm going to let her know that, hey, that's probably not the best greeting. It could be offensive. And she said, "Okay, I'll call you old lady then," which, of course, totally missed the mark, didn't really get it there, but I shut down. And that's something that could happen to any of our students, right? If we don't use inclusive language in regards to a student's age or perceived age. The next couple are difficult, but necessary. We teach on assumptions. We never say to a student, "Okay, so when you go home," because not every student has a home, right? We don't say things like, "All right, you're going to have your mom or dad fill out the FAFSA," because not everyone has a mother or a father. The nuclear family is not the same in every household, and so we're really cautious with the assumptions that we make. We also are cautious on microaggressions. I've heard people say things like, "Oh, were you born here?" That's a microaggression. Why would you think anything otherwise? Or, "Wow, you speak English really well." So this is a harder training that we have with our team, but it's a necessary one because a student doesn't have multiple interactions with the institution. They would never say to you like, "Wow, the financial aid office was really great, but the one stop wasn't so awesome." They have one interaction or one experience with the institution across the board. The last piece of our trainings are some of our communication strategies. We use positive tone and body language. I encourage my team to smile and dial when they're on the phones. We encourage people to use headsets, get up. I myself am a pacer. I like to walk around. I'm not right now, in case you're curious, but I like to get up, walk around. I think that standing makes you sound more awake, and we use that on the phone and in person. The next one is a pet peeve of mine. When I hear people on the phone or in person and they say things like, "So do you have any questions?" Because if somebody says to you, "Do you have any questions?" you're going to say, "No." But if I said to you, "What questions do you have about submitting your test scores? What questions do you have about financial aid?" We choose open-ended questions because students will answer them. They can't say no. That's not an option. We use affirming verbiage. That is making sure that no matter what we are saying to students, and we don't always give the best news, right? So instead of saying like, "Hey, you didn't pay, so your classes were dropped for non-payment," we say, "Hey, your classes were dropped for non-payment, but great news, we can re-register you." We wouldn't say something like, "You failed the placement test." We would say, "Congratulations, you qualified for developmental English. What time would you like to take that?" So we just make sure to keep everything positive. We empower our students to DIY, right? "Okay, so you're going to schedule that appointment now. Okay, I'm going to call back tomorrow and confirm to make sure that you didn't have any problems." we like to make sure that we're setting the expectations and the call to action. So the student knows exactly what they're doing, when they're doing it, and when we are going to reach out to them. We only do warm transfers. I think a lot of times this sounds obvious, but it's not. We want to make sure that if we're moving somebody or transferring somebody on a phone or in person over to another department, we are doing the legwork for them. We are calling the other department, identifying that we have a student on the phone or in person, what the student's situation is and exactly what they need. So that way the student doesn't have to reiterate it again, and we're not transferring somebody over to the middle of cyberspace. Our students don't pick up the phone to order a pizza, so it's unlikely that they're going to pick up the phone again to get a question answered if they already did that once. The ASAP technique is essentially a technique that we use for conflict resolution. It is apologizing. That's the first A. We don't ever apologize for the institution. We apologize for the situation that they're going through, or we apologize that they feel a certain way. We make sure to sympathize and empathize. I understand what you're going through. We accept the responsibility, saying, I'm going to be the one that's going to help you going forward, and then we prepare to help, how we're going to help. We very often will call somebody the next day. We'll reach out by email 2 days later. Hey, I don't have an answer for you yet, but I'm still on it for you. And our students really appreciate that. And then lastly is the active listening and finding the barriers. Students don't always identify what the issue is. Oftentimes they don't actually know what the issue is, but we listen really carefully to make sure that we're identifying exactly what the problem is, and then listening for what the barriers to education or enrollment might be in order to move them forward. I wanted to first pause before we move on to the next slide, which is one of my favorites, to see if there were any questions. Is that okay with you there, Kirk?
Absolutely. Yeah, feel free to post any questions in the chat section around if you have any thoughts on how you're experiencing these types of situations, or with your staff, do you do any similar trainings? You have questions for Sheena about how it works on her team. I'm actually curious, Sheena, when you're training your staff, I mean, this seems like for a Gen Xer like me to really bake in all of this sort of new knowledge in terms of customer service feels like a lot to me as a Gen Xer. But I'm wondering for you and your team how it's been received and how the students have reacted once you've kind of leveled up the customer service to meet their demands.
The students are obviously happy. I feel like we've seen actually a major increase in our Noel Levitt's customer service survey. The one that we did from 2016 to 2018, we saw specific higher levels of satisfaction in every area that involved customer service. So I think that speaks for itself. The students also know now we've created a culture of like, if you're not sure, go to the hub, go to the one stop. They're going to be able to help you. And at least they're going to be nice, right? They know they're going to get the right service, and that has been with all of our stakeholders. We do this training all internally. We've built it up ourselves. We developed it, and then we continue to assess it based on our individual technicians, and we adjust it, right? Because just like our students are constantly changing, we need to make sure that we're staying on top of what's important for them.
Got it. And there was a question came in actually, Sheena. Do you do this training internally or do you outsource it?
It is internal. It is time consuming, but we do it all internally. The first 6 weeks, a technician is with us. They are in the office, and then we do the continuous training on a weekly basis, which is pretty good.
Gotcha.
Seems to work for
Great.
us.
That might, yeah, that's a good segue, I guess, into the next sort of phase of the presentation here, kind of talking about how you're implementing technology to meet these expectations. Yeah.
So we bought a robot, sort of, kind of. This is Reggie. His
like that?
Original.
Does it look?
Yeah,
does
yeah.
Reggie look like this?
He's got those exact moves, actually.
Pretty good.
Reggie, his full name is Reginald Bott, but his friends can call him Reggie, so you're welcome to call him Reggie. He was born in November of 2017, and he's a chat bot, which sometimes they're called virtual assistants, but it's essentially a computer program that is designed to simulate conversation with human users, especially over the internet. Ours works primarily with texting, and now also with a web widget. And it's kind of like a tennis match, right? Question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. Reggie answers questions from our students via texting, which is the modality that we already identified they're comfortable with. And he works 24/7. So by default, he's actually one of my favorite employees because he never calls out sick. He works 24/7. He's really consistent. We use Reggie in a plethora of ways, and we didn't have to train our team to use Reggie as much as we trained Reggie himself. So we use Reggie for proactive nudges. That would be things like, hey, registration's open. Hey, now it's the time to order your transcripts for transferring to another institution or for your classes you just took. Reggie offers on-demand assistance, so a student can text anytime, any day, and Reggie will respond automatically. We do all of our surveys through Reggie. So after an event, hey, how was the open house? Are you still interested? We gauge our interest that way. Did you want to speak to somebody? Reggie does a lot of banter. The students crack themselves up and frankly crack us up too by asking things like, what's your favorite food? Do you want a date? What are you wearing? There's a lot of that. They try to stump Reggie. We have started using Reggie for early warnings and intervention. So, hey, we wouldn't say something like you failed your test, but we would say, hey, did you know that we have tutoring services on campus? Or there's a support group meeting today, things like that. We're actually going to be pulling in all of our college student inventory, our CSI data, for this reason, because we can determine which students are at risk, use that data, and then hit them with very specific messages. We also use Reggie for student engagement. So there's an instant decision day today. I know you're on campus. Did you know the Frappuccinos are discounted today? Things like that, just to get students out about and speaking to each other, which is great. So we're going to show you some examples of some of our conversations here. A recent one that we sent was for fall registration. We're getting ready to send our spring registration one out next week, but basically that professor you really love, everyone else does too. Register now. Also, we do a lot of reminders about payments being due, financial aid reminders, it's time to do X, Y, or Z, and the students really appreciate it. They have said that they love that quick text message that tells them exactly what they should do, when they should do it, and includes the links of how to do it often as well. We also use Reggie, as we indicated, for on-demand assistance. So these are actual examples of student conversations. How do I do my financial aid? Here's how you do it. What's the website? Here it is. What's the school code? Here it is. 80% of students attend an institution like to do their research online, but it can be very difficult for a student to hunt and peck and find the quick and easy question that they're looking for. And Reggie handles a lot of our repetitive, honestly, and I don't want to say monotonous, but a lot of the questions that we get all day long. And so he can easily and quickly answer that for a student on demand anytime. So it makes it really easy. To give you some background, these are what students were asking. So this is our college's report and our data from September 2018 through April of 2019. And you'll see the wide variety of questions students were asking. I didn't anticipate that students would be asking about that many different topics. I thought it would be really black and white, and they would ask really basic things. It amazes me that every day a student asks a question that's like never been asked before. We do a lot of financial aid information because that is what students get confused about. A lot of things about where do I go for, this service, where do I go for that service, where do I find out more about this major or that major. So that's the academic things. The one piece that I love is that about a quarter of our questions that are incoming, and we've had over 16,000 incoming messages in the past, well, from September 18 to April 19, and that's pretty crazy. We have a student body of only about 10,000 students, and that's full-time and part-time, online and on campus, and that includes all of our high school students as well. So 16,000 incoming messages, and we messaged out to over 33,000 potential and current students. About a quarter of those were after office hours, though. So how many of those students would have had a question that never got answered if we didn't have the technology in place to answer that question? The additional statistics is that we had an engagement rate of 26% during the first year. That's pretty stellar. And compared to your 10% open rates on emails, which is what higher ed's at, that is pretty significant. Although we are still down from where we were in 2014, we did see a 1.9% year-to-date growth from 17 to 18, which is significant for us. We also worked out that we saved about 6 weeks of staff hours. That's anticipating that it takes like 1 to 2 minutes to answer each question. And if you multiply that out by a 40-hour work week, that is how I actually was able to get Reggie, because you look at what you're saving as far as resources, and that's 6 weeks of staff hours that I was able to have my team digging into more complex issues and really spending time with the students that really need that one-on-one, working with students that have more in-depth situations, just by simply taking that batch of questions off the top. So, in closing, your takeaways from today's webinar should be Gen Z, right? Today's students are different. We have to change how we're communicating with them and how we're training our team to communicate with them in order to meet their needs and meet their expectations. We have to use technology in order to streamline our internal processes, enhance institutional relationships, and engage on a higher level with students. The technology exists. We have to use it. And then lastly, this is literally the foundation of my department, is that customer service needs to be baked in. You can't sprinkle it on top. It's not an afterthought. It's not the whipped cream on your sundae. It has to be part of it. It has to be an ingredient that you teach and train on, and you can hold your team accountable for. That is what I have, and that is the boom sauce. Kirk, do you have any questions?
Perfect ending. Mother of Dragons. I actually had a question, and as well for folks who are attending, feel free to jot any questions in the chat section. I was wondering about how the student interaction and engagement via Reggie has potentially sort of impacted traffic at the hub, right? And this might be, the hub is rather new at OCC as well, so you might, it just was sort of a question that kind of came to the top of my head, but do you see students that are using Reggie first to try to get that sort of self-service and then head to the hub if they need additional support or guidance, or just kind of curious about that, how that's all working at OCC?
For sure, yeah. We introduce our students to Reggie from the time that they're a prospect, so before they've actually become a student. And they are so quick to recognize Reggie is a college employee. He can answer my questions, and they do. They go to Reggie first. We often get phone calls like, hey, I was just talking to Reggie, or students will come in and say, Reggie told me that I should come in and do X. So they know that Reggie's a virtual assistant, but it's the same as asking, are our students comfortable interacting with Alexa or Siri? I just said Alexa, and my Alexa went off. She's like, what do you need? So it's not that different, but they absolutely do utilize Reggie first, they become comfortable with it. And even if he has to say, like, you know, my robot brain isn't sure, let me get back to you, they trust that Reggie will get back to them with the right answer.
Got it. Another question that came in was around when answering these questions, when Reggie answers a question over text message, for example, we had talked a bit before, and you had mentioned before about the sort of customer service expectation of Gen Z, that you're giving them information that is sort of leading them to the next thing, right? Like the Netflix, sort of recommendations, right? But
right.
What is the experience like with Reggie? Is it just answering that question and then giving another suggestion, or is it allowing that student to sort of take his or her own course?
It really depends on the questions. And so for things like financial aid, we often will give them the next step also. Hey, you're completing your financial aid, that's great. We'll answer their question and say, don't forget to do your HESA questions. That would be like the NJ questions related for state aid. If somebody has a question that it makes sense to answer the next piece also, or make a suggestion, we oftentimes link to parts of our website with short and bit.ly links. We also send them to landing pages that we have designed and developed in order to answer questions based on who the student is. So because students are really different, they don't all have the same process. So we can't assume who they are when they're asking the question. You know, we don't always know what their next step will be.
And I feel that, yep. And I feel that, and you might do this at Ocean County, and I know a lot of our other partners do this as well. When they are sending out interactive surveys to students, it's almost like a choose your own adventure type of situation, right? So students answering a question about their interest, for example, and they're not sure about attending, and then Reggie's going to follow up and ask, and dig a little deeper. What are the reasons? And potentially, based on those responses, there are going to be additional resources that the student is given throughout that conversation, right? So, you're concerned about the academic programs. Well, here's a few resources for you, or maybe you can set up a time to talk with someone, etc. So I feel like it goes kind of both ways with the AI piece and the sort of brain of Reggie, but also with you and your team as you're sort of reaching out to students and planning the type of resources you want to give them based on their responses.
It is, yeah. Our surveys are all like conditional formatting, essentially.
Yeah.
So we can, if you choose X, then give them the option to ask Y. It's all conditional formatting.
Yep. Another question that came up was identifying if a student or a parent asked the question, and I know, and Sheena, you can speak to this, but because I'm guessing that you only will engage students with Reggie, and other institutions will open it up to parents as well. Typically, there's a unique student identifier that is linked to each of these conversations, so we know if it's a student based on that unique identifier. But some institutions will have what are called open chatbots, right? So anyone can message in via the website or via social media or even text into the number. And if it's not linked with that unique student identifier, because colleges want to keep that data very clean with their students, then they'll know it's someone outside of that student population.
Yes, yep. And we're on a closed system right now. So the only people that can ask questions to Reggie or text Reggie are people that we've engaged with already. And the reason that we actually chose to do it that way was because I wanted to make sure to have all of the information for any lead. I didn't want a potential student or an opportunity to be able to ask a question, get their answer, and then we lose who they are and the ability to keep up with them, to follow up with them accurately. So that's why we made that choice, but I do know colleagues that use their chatbot as an open system as well.
What about in terms of for you and your team, Sheena, the time it takes to manage Reggie? Reggie's having conversations with thousands of students. What's it look like in terms of the impact on your staff and your team?
It's actually pretty minimal. When we're sending out a large campaign, we make sure that we have student workers or part-time technicians that are, in the dashboard just in case. But typically, Reggie answers the questions on his own, and we don't have to manage it too much. He manages himself, really. Mm-hmm. If there's a question he doesn't know the answer to, it will either go through managed services or then as a third or second option, I guess, Reggie first, then manage, then it would come to us as a third, but we've only gotten about 2% forwarded over to my team. And it's basically considered escalation. So we get very few questions actually escalated. We just jump in sometimes to conversations if we feel like we could provide students with additional information. If they ask really individualized questions like, where is my financial aid, or where do I log in to do X, Y, or Z? But the actual time that it takes to manage is really minimal. And for training our team to use Reggie, it's super intuitive. It took no time at all. Everyone jumped right in. My student workers love it because it's super easy.
Gotcha. There was another question about Reggie's brain, the knowledge base. How extensive is it? Do you kind of know off the top of your head how it's grown over time?
I want to say we have about 2,800 questions within our knowledge base, and each question has fuzzy questions behind it. So one question might actually be 12 questions, right? Because we ask things really differently than students. The student might say, I'm broke. But what they really mean is how do I do my financial aid? So I want to say we have a little
I'm woke.
They might. If they're woke, they'll have their financial aid done already because it's open.
That's so true. So that's interesting to note about the knowledge base and sort of the collective data, in that a student can ask a question in a myriad of ways, but they might be trying to get at one particular answer. And so the AI has to be able to learn and to know the types of phrases and slang and misspellings and the different ways that a student might ask a particular question that's then linked to a particular response. And so there are many synonyms, as we say, in terms of questions that could potentially be linked to a certain response that is institutionally based.
Yep, and what actually got me too is the spellings. Students don't always spell everything properly. They sometimes use U instead of YOU, and the bot picks all of that up, which is great.
Yeah, and Reggie is available for folks if they wanted to meet it on your website, correct?
Reggie's available from our future students page, I believe it is called now. So our admissions page, you can get onto the web widget that way. In order to get full access, if you want to play with our system, people can email me. I'm happy to get you in as a potential student. On the web, you wouldn't get some of the GIFs, and that would be really one of the only differences. And then the initial introductions are a little bit different. They're less not interactive, but they're not as colorful.
Yeah,
we're actually changing over a different system now. So.
Gotcha. And you're also not going to be reaching out to those folks on the web with potential campaigns or interactive surveys and whatnot as well, like you would to a student over text.
I always request a demo probably from AdmitHub as well. That's what we did, and that's what helped us and me really sell the system to our upper management.
Gotcha. Well, it seems like we've handled lots of questions, and this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Sheena, for your time and valuable expertise, and thank you to everyone who attended today's webinar. We know it's a busy time of year, especially after November 1, and we will definitely send out this recording, and you'll be able to actually see that dank video on YouTube that was not able to play here today. But thank you so much again. Have a great week and farewell.
Thank you.